So this evening, just want to talk to you for a couple of minutes about Jesus' Fault. Now, this is actually a song title, kind of a silly song in a way, by Zach Williams. It's kind of silly. I find it a little bit humorous in a way, but there's some serious truth to it as well. The main theme of the song is that if you miss the old me, that's Jesus' fault, right? I've been changed by the Lord. So that's the idea, right? But it's just a little bit of, the chorus is just kind of funny in the way that they do it. You'd have to hear it, but that's okay. You get the idea. And it just reminds us that when we come to the Lord, when we're following Jesus, people should see a change in us, right? They should miss that old us, or depending on what the old us was like, maybe they're glad the old us is gone. I mean, just depending, right? So it also reminds me of these verses here in Peter. If we look in 1 Peter, I'm going to look at verses 1 through 6, basically. But we'll start here in 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. Now, at the end of chapter 3, Peter tells us that baptism saves us through the resurrection of Christ. So let's read these verses here. Therefore, since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same mind, for he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh for the lusts of men, but for the will of God. So we should be living for God, not for our own desires or pleasures or lusts. We should be fulfilling the will of God in our lives. Let's look at the next couple of verses here, verses 3 and 4. For we have spent enough of our past lifetime in doing the will of the Gentiles when we walked in lewdness, lusts, drunkenness, revelries, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. In regard to these, they think it strange that you do not run with them in the same flood of dissipation, speaking evil of you. So we've wasted enough of our life, right? Being deceived into sin and following Satan. Depending on, each of us probably have a slightly different story of when we came to the Lord, different things like that. But or we've had struggles even along the way. We're supposed to be on that straight and narrow path, but a lot of times our path looks more like this, right? So, we have these struggles. We have these times whether we're deceived into following Satan or we're purposely sometimes following sin. We as Christians should be done with that old life. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be done with all these old things. If you look at this list here, the lust, the drunkenness, the revelries, and all of that. We should be done with all of those things. We should be living a much better life today. And I think a lot of this in the world that we see is people do not understand this life. They don't appreciate the fact that it's from God, and they don't really understand God or our purpose in this life. So they're lost and unhappy, and they seek pleasure in these worldly things. But we should not be doing that as Christians. We should not. If you notice verse 4, when we find Christ and we're baptized, we start to learn from God what this life is about, what our purpose is, and what our destination is. It changes us. It changes the way we look at life, the way we look at things in this world, and what we think is really important versus what the world thinks is important. So then maybe our old friends don't understand why. They don't understand our change. They don't understand why we look at things differently. Why aren't we taking pleasure in these old things, right? There's all these changes that go on, and maybe for some of them it's because they recognize the sin they're in, the harmful practices that they're doing, which are harmful to themselves, right? They see us, they come to the Lord, they don't really understand the change that we have or why. Because our hearts change, and it's reflected in our actions, or sometimes in our lack of actions, because we're not doing those same things. So sometimes maybe those old friends, they grow distant. Maybe they get a little angry. Maybe they become resentful. They can be insulting. This can happen. Not everyone is that way, but some are. But don't be disturbed or distracted by that. It's somewhat of a natural reaction that someone still in sin, still enjoying their sin, might be upset because a friend of theirs has changed and isn't running with them in those things anymore, those sinful things. So, don't turn against them or distance yourself from them. Instead, remind them of these next verses. Verses 5 and 6. They will give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For this reason, the gospel was preached also to those who are dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit. Warn them of this judgment in verse 5, because this judgment is from him who is ready to judge the living and the dead, right? Encourage them to join you in the Lord. Your old friends is what I'm thinking of. They are spiritually dead and blind in their sin. They need the gospel, such as in verse 6 says, for this reason the gospel is preached also to those who are dead. They are dead if they are not in the Lord. Anybody we see that is not in the Lord is essentially dead. So, just like we were before we came to the Lord, before the Lord changed us. So to close, just when people wonder why you don't live the way you did in the past, or why you don't go to all the same parties or activities, why you aren't looking for those sinful pleasures, and why those things aren't fun for you anymore, you can just tell them, it's kind of like that song, it's Jesus' fault. He's changed you for the better. But remind them too that he's waiting to change them. He's willing and waiting to change them for the better as well. And this evening, if you're subject to the call in any way, if you need anything, be it baptism or prayer, we invite you to come forward as we stand and sing.